Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
Welcome to another edition of the All Out Leadership Podcast. We're going to take the next couple episodes and we're going to focus on the subject of customer service. We are all in the service industry. As followers of Jesus Christ, we're called to be servants to one another. We're about serving people. If you're working in a job, somehow it intersects with customers, and your job is to take care of customers. And if you are an employer, a business owner, you definitely understand the value of your customers. So this next couple weeks is going to be very helpful, practical for all of us. There was a young psychology student who got drafted into the Army, and he wanted to put a theory he was working on to the test. He was placed in the chow line where his job was to pass out apricots. And not everybody really liked apricots, so he thought this is a great opportunity to test out his psychological experiment. So the first group of people that came through, he made this statement. He goes, "You don't want apricots, do you?" 90% said no. The next group that came through, he said, "You want some apricots, don't you?" Well, 50% said, "Yes, I'll take some." And then finally, as the last group was coming through, he said, "Would you like one dish or would you like two dishes of apricots?" 40% said two dishes, 50% took only one, and only 10% didn't take any. Now, what you could see there is the power of the psychological subliminal statement. Hey, you don't want any apricots. Well, yeah, no, I don't. Would you like one or would you like two? You could see that there's a message inside of there subtly. And when we're interacting with people, with customers, with potential new people in a church, wherever you're leading, you're sending out these subliminal messages. We don't want you here, or you know what? We really want you here. You really matter to us. So we see Jesus really understood the psychology of the message that he's sending to people. I want to read Mark chapter 1, verse 40. Now a leper came to him, speaking of Jesus, imploring him, kneeling down to him and saying, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Notice the question isn't can you, it's just are you willing to? And really most people come to God not questioning his ability, but questioning his willingness, because we question our worthiness. It's never about our worthiness, but just know this: God is always willing to intervene inside of your life when you ask. Then Jesus, moved with compassion, stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, "I am willing, be cleansed." And notice this next line. As soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy left him and he was clean. It wasn't necessarily that Jesus couldn't just say to the man, "Be thou clean," because when Jesus spoke the word, the leprosy left. But why did Jesus touch him if he could heal him with just his word? I think it's found in this. The deepest need the man had was, do I matter? Am I important? And do you love me enough to touch me? What Jesus was doing was actually meeting a deeper need than the healing of leprosy. And he was really meeting the need of a broken heart. He had a broken body, but because of his broken body, he had been rejected. He was an outcast. Anytime he went into a city, he had to shout out, "Unclean." Everybody had to keep at least 100 feet distance from this man. He had to live in isolation. He had to live with other lepers. So what this man was suffering from was a lack of human affection, a lack of interaction, a lack of being accepted. He just lacked love. And so what Jesus did is he actually broke the law he wrote, and that is to not touch anything unclean. And that is he took care of touching the deeper need of this man of saying, "Hey, you're important, you matter to me." And when customers are coming into your store, when people are intersecting, it's not just about a product, that they're looking for. At the end of the day, everybody is looking for a sense of meaning, a sense of significance. Do I matter? And is there value and meaning to my life? And so when we can help meet that and affirm that beyond just trying to have some transactional relationship, what you really do is win customers for life. In the case of a church, for us, our job is people and helping them understand they matter to God. It's about helping people miss hell and make heaven. And so the more we can communicate their value, that you're not just a body and a seat, you're not just somebody to give an offering, you're not just someone we can put to work and help lift the load, but you matter to Jesus, therefore you matter to us. You really win lifelong relationships and lifelong loyalty. So 3 things we really learn in Jesus' whole interaction here. Number 1, Jesus wants to answer people's deepest needs and deepest question, and that is, am I valuable? I like what the cyclist Lance Armstrong wrote in his book. He said, it's not about the bike. And he's making a point. It's really not about the bike. It's about the person on the bike. And it's about people, not just the product that we're trying to sell or the transaction we're trying to make. I like what John Maxwell says. It's hard to make somebody feel like a somebody when inwardly you think they are a nobody. We've all been around somebody who smiles. We've all been around somebody who says the right thing to you, but inwardly you just get this sense like they're condescending towards me. They're judging me. I'm less than this person. They think they're above me. And you can say all the right things, but if in your heart you're judging people and condescending to people, people feel that. And so sometimes with our actions we say you matter, but with our motives we're sending a different message. People can feel that. Your customers can feel that. Number 2, Jesus isn't afraid to touch unclean people. James chapter 2 talks about favoritism, and it's easy to do this when you got customers coming into your store, or especially if you're in sales, you're kind of, can this person afford this car? Can this person afford, this product? I like what James says. He goes, my brothers as believers in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ, don't show favoritism. Suppose a man comes into your meeting wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and a poor man in shabby clothes, and he comes in. If you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes and say, here's a good seat for you, but say to the poor man, you stand there, or you sit on the floor at my feet, have you not discriminated among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? That is a very important spiritual principle in how we relate to people, but it also applies into corporate, into business, and how you treat every single customer that you interact. And a lot of times we look at the outward appearance of somebody to judge their net worth or their ability to purchase a product, which is really bad because when you really look at certain statistics, a lot of wealthy people don't actually look wealthy. You've probably read it, The Millionaire Next Door. When you read the book, The Millionaire Next Door, most millionaires aren't driving the expensive $250,000 car. They're driving a Toyota Camry, which is the number 1 car a millionaire drives. And so if you were just to look at a Sam Walton who drives an old pickup truck and is wearing overalls, you would make a major mistake when he walked into a store, because you would think he probably couldn't afford, these watches, or he couldn't afford, these nice cars. He could buy your company out, man. But if you're just judging by how somebody looks, you're going to really miss some great opportunities. And we as a church are going to miss great opportunities if we judge somebody by how they look. Because at the end of the day, whether somebody has a penny in their pocket or they have $1 billion in their pocket, that has no impact on their value to God. It's not your net worth that determines your eternal worth. Your eternal worth was determined by what was paid for you, and that's Jesus' death on the cross. I was shopping one time. Actually, I wasn't shopping. I was with friends who were shopping. And we were on a trip to Los Angeles. And so we wanted to go to the famous Rodeo Drive. And that is a very, very, very expensive street. And the street's just lined with, Ferraris and Porsches and Bentleys, cars, Rolls Royces, with chauffeurs in them. In fact, so we walked into Prada. One of my friends, he liked Prada, and from time to time he would pick up, an item from the Prada store. And out in front of the Prada store was this Rolls Royce. The chauffeur was standing there, and there was a kid. The chauffeur opened the door, and some rich kid gets out and walks into the Prada store. Now, when we walked in, we were just dressed like average, normal, middle-class guys. Now, one of the friends I was with was actually a high net worth person. He actually had quite a bit of money. I wasn't broke. My other friend wasn't broke. We had a few dollars to our names. And The representative that was in the store was this young kid. He was wearing all the Prada. There was a girl who was also working on staff. Everything they had was Prada. Now, I am pretty positive that they didn't buy Prada based on their salary. They couldn't afford what they were wearing based on what they're getting paid. They could afford it because they're giving those items at next to nothing because the store wants them to wear their product. So we walk in, and because we don't look like we have money, they're talking to everybody else in the store who does look like they have money. And I had a friend who actually wanted to buy some things, but they never came over to talk to us. They would kind of look our way almost condescendingly if they ever did glance at us. And so we walked out of the store eventually having never bought anything, even though we could have afforded things. And my friend actually wanted to buy some things. We walked out. Why? Because of the attitude of the employee who judged us based on what we looked like. Jesus values touch above talk, which is the third thing that we really see. And there's a lot of people who are really good at the talk, but they're not good at the walk. And at the end of the day, it's not your words that really ultimately send the message to your customer. It's how you touch them, how you follow up with them. It's the follow through on the commitments that you make. It's the follow up after the sale that really is determining, are they valuable or am I just some kind of transaction? Research has shown that 90% of what we learn is visual and 10% is auditory. So you could be saying the right things, but that's only 10% of the message you're saying. What your customer really remembers at the end of the day is all the visual signs, the subliminal communication that sent a message, whether or not they really matter or whether or not they don't. All right, I'm going to give you some really practical things over the next couple weeks on good best practices for customer service. See you next week.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out further. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at ericlawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.